Hi guys, welcome to Fantasyland. I am not sure why I called it that, but that's what came to the top of my head, so that's what I'm gonna go with for now. Now, I was just thinking, the trailer for season 8 coming out, it's Game of Thrones is all in the news again, and that just kind of had me wanting to get back into Thrones a little bit. I see a lot of people out here with all their hot takes, and I saw one on Twitter that really got to me. And honestly, it got to me so much that I had to make this video. And I'm gonna get into exactly what that is and why I thought it was important. But first, I just wanted to say, thank you to all those subscribers that have stuck with me. I know it's been a little while. I think my audio should be a little bit better now. Feel free to give me a like for that. If you hear anything else that you like going forward, just absolutely smash the like button. I know everyone asks you to, but they do that because it matters a lot. It's going to help other people see the video. So that'd be awesome. And, remember the sub as well. So we can keep this little, I don't know, we're kind of in a little new digital media space here, a little kind of new kind of conversation. I like to think a lot about President FDR and his fireside chats. I know I like listening to podcasts and stuff a lot myself, so that'd be awesome too. But like I was saying, I was on Twitter and looking, with the trailers out, people are excited for the trailer, everyone's talking about it, and of course, with part of that, people are complaining about the show because something so popular is bound to have people dislike it, and really that's fine. That happens, right? People have their tastes, and I definitely have my own problems with the show too. Even though, especially lately with the last couple seasons, I think the show's kind of changed, and that's actually kind of why I thought this thought was important. But basically, what really got to me on Twitter was I saw one guy. I'm not gonna mention his name just so people don't go after him, but basically he said that he hates people talking about the show, and he stopped watching the show after Bran gets thrown out the window. Now, I think, if I recall that's like episode 2 of season 1, so way back. And that's fine, because, if he doesn't like the show, he doesn't like that sort of thing, then he made the right choice, right? So, who can blame him for that? But what got me hot was all these people talking about, and by the way, I want to mention, people in my last video has been talking about the annoying smacking sound. It's not a smacking sound. I just have a dry mouth, I guess. Sorry about it. I have my water right here, so I can stay nice and moisturized, and keep you guys with a good audio. Think of it as a little ASMR, right? That's what we're going with here, because I can't rework my mouth. Had braces. I'm gonna blame the braces. The orthodontists. I'm convinced it's a scam. All of that. I'm convinced. The dentist giving kickbacks because I got braces, came back, look mostly the same, just a couple $1,000s down. So sorry, there's gonna be some tangents in here. I'm just freewheeling. But like I was saying, what really got to me were the people that were agreeing with him. And again, I'm fine with people agreeing, opinions. Hard to blame people for their opinions, especially when, they're just talking about their kind of entertainment, right? But what got to me was the people ragging on the show for what the show does that I think what makes the show special. They were saying, the violence got to them, the incest, they're saying just formulaic. It's just killing people for shock value, just cheap entertainment, like it's a Transformers movie or something, But the reason it got to me is that, and kind of the reason for why I think it's important going into all that, is that they're not exactly wrong, are they? I know some people are going to agree with that, some people are not, whether you watch the books or the show. Um, what did I just say? Watch the book to the show. Read the books or watch the show. And the reason I say that they're not exactly wrong, even though what they said annoyed me, is because I think as the show has gone forward, it has fallen into that a little bit. Especially if you look at what the show started out as and what it's become. Those, I think it's turned from something special into something that's kind of more, more shock value, kind of cheap tricks, which I would normally say is okay, but I think when you look at least for me, what I thought was special about Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones in general was what it said, and I don't really think it's able to do that the same way that it used to. Just to prove that point a little bit, I just want you to think about where you were when you first started watching or you first read the story. Now, for me personally, I had heard of it back in 2010, I think. I had a friend who recommended it to me, and this is how she sold it. She said, oof, it's a rough one. She said that it was like Lord of the Rings, but with sex. Now, that kind of intrigued me. Now, of course, going forward, I would say that's kind of a terrible description of Game of Thrones. I think it's kind of the inverse of Lord of the Rings, and selling it to me on the sex was kind of a cheap move. And it really, kind of going back on what we're talking about, I think people can read that sex as being, just kind of a vulgar, just kind of cheap entertainment, just trying to get some thrills and chills. But I think the show does a lot more than that. I think it has a lot more to say. I think the story is a lot deeper. Yeah, I think the story is a lot deeper than that. So it wasn't the best description, thankfully. But so going into it, I had this idea that, it's just kind of using, the sex and stuff cheaply. Just to, get some thrills. Like I said. But I think, that's selling it short, because it does a lot more with it. The thing I would say is that everything, kind of vulgar it does for a reason, normally. Sorry for that bump. This is out the trunk production right now. We're working on getting a little professional in here, but for the moment, this is gritty. That's what we'll call it, gritty. But so, like I was saying, I came into the show. I came into the books. A little apprehensive. I probably hadn't read, a high fantasy for a number of years. I had been reading kind of more historical fiction types of things. So I came into it a little apprehensive. And, immediately, if you just think back to where you were when you first started watching, immediately I got, George gets you with the others, So you're coming in, kind of introduced to this world, and it's just cold. You're out on the ice, and then it's just cold. And I remember in the books, George has this great turn where he has a Royce, I believe, coming in. He's kind of cocky, and just has that great line, dance with me. He talks to this thing he doesn't know, that's, whining. The ice is so cold, the steel's whining, it breaks his sword. And you're just kind of, you're hit with questions, you're hit with mystery, and then it just goes, dance with me. And that was like, okay. He got me with that a little bit. George is, well, we can have a debate about it. Some people disagree, but I think, George is generally a pretty good writer. Especially in the earlier books. He was really sharp. Like Game of Thrones, really, really sharp book. Sharp as an other sword. That it cuts you, right? It sets you up and it hits you with hits you with the counterpunch. So then after going through the prologue, you start out in the books. You start out with Bran's chapter, and I was just rereading it. The first chapter. It's a really good job setting up, all of as a book should. It does a great job setting up all the themes. Setting up this kind of mysticism, of the importance of the dire wolves. It sets up the world, right? Immediately it sets up Theon as being a jackass because he kicks the executed man's head, and immediately it sets up John as being decent guy. I don't remember this, but looking back at it, John is the one who kind of makes everything happen, because Bran comes in, he wants the wolves, and then John is the one who convinces his father to keep the wolves, and sets up this whole story. And so immediately you like John, and then as you go in and go through John's POV, you already like him, right? And so it sets up the good and bad in the character, but thinking about the themes, it shows how cruel the world is as well, because as we come to find out, the man's executed didn't desert because he necessarily wanted to, right? He ran away from, we saw him running away from the others. So it shows, how the world's unfair, and it shows Ned's worldview, and how that worldview is, immediately it's in paradox, because we see that he wants to be just, but we come to find out that his justice is unjust in itself, right? Unjust in itself. So we have this kind of paradox, and immediately you have Ned come in with his the man who passes the sentence should be the one who swings the sword. So you kind of like Ned, and then next chapter we go into Catelyn, and she's and immediately you get all this kind of other cultural experience because she's from the South, and so you're getting just this kind of expansive sense of the world. And for me personally, thinking back on it, I was like, okay, this is good, but it was still, and I get the themes and stuff, but it still felt like I kept waiting for it to be, okay, this is, high fantasy, the good guys win, etc., etc., right? And so going along, we have these kind of themes of like, oh, the world's not fair, and it's not the good person who wins, it's, the smartest person, and you have this Game of Thrones, and I was all on board with that, because it's quite different. Now, thinking back, there are lots of, series that have similar ideas, I'm just thinking, this had been maybe, I was reading this a bit after The Dark Knight had come out, so we kind of had this, there's kind of culturally with this thing around, grittiness and realism, and, I think the kind of, the zeitgeist, I guess, of our stories was just shying away from the, good and evil, happily ever after type of stories out, in the mainstream. As far as fantasy, I hadn't really experienced anything quite like this, where I was just kind of like, oh, I agree with that. I was all on board. And I was also apprehensive because I was going through it. I was just waiting for it to turn into like, okay, this is a fantasy story and there's your ending, right? So going all the way up until what happens to Ned, and I blame George a little bit for this, because he does set you up, right? Because he sets up that this idea that, oh, Ned can be sent to the Night's Watch, and so you start going all mentally in your head, you start going along this tangent of like, oh, okay, I see where the story can go. Ned's gonna be sent up with Jon, and they're gonna have a father bastard son bonding experience, and that's gonna be the rest of the book, because this is the book had been out 15 years when I'm reading this, so I knew there were more books. I figured that's where the books would go. And then that doesn't happen. Then you see, oh, Arya has been training with her sword. And then, the chapter that happens, Arya is rushing through the crowd to try to get to him. And, I figured you just get your mind just gets trained from watching so many kind of not bad, but just average kind of media. Good guys win. There's a little plot armor. Stuff like that happens. So Arya had been training with her sword. I figured, okay, Arya somehow is gonna get him out of this. But that chapter does a great job as it goes along, and you just see what Arya's up against. You're kind of like, well, there's no way that she can do this, is there? And it would just make me angrier because I was thinking like, okay, I see she should not be able to do this, and she keeps going to it, and I feel like he's gonna let her find a way to get him out. I was getting angry because I was like, no, you can't set up everything about the best person winning and the smartest person winning, and how being, just being justice focused and honest, is not what works in this world or our world either. And so I was getting really, really angry. I was like, oh, come on. Like, what's your name? Oh, George R. R. Martin. Okay, you were so close, right? I was already there. I was like, oh, man, you're so close. But, pretty good, whatever. I was going through it. And then she doesn't get there, right? And then she doesn't get there. And that's the moment I said, oh, this is for real. This is for real. This is, that got me. I think I finished the chapter and I put the book down. And this was in summer. I think, I went for a walk. I got an ice cream or something. Because I was just like, I could not believe. Because I was thrilled. I was elated, right? I was thrilled that the writer would do this. And it did exactly what really I wanted him to do. And I kind of couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, he really did it. And it hit the spot. And on the other hand, I was, Ned, man, as you go through the series, you see that Ned's kind of a fool, but we're all foolish a little bit, right? And so you feel for him. He didn't. He lived his life by code, and he in the world he lives in, that's what happens, right? But still, you hate to see it happen. But on the other hand, it was so satisfying, right? And it feels kind of gross to say that, but it really was satisfying because it followed what the rule. It was the point of the story coming clear, right? And so going back to this idea of people complaining on Twitter, and for years people have been talking about there's too much violence against women. It's unnecessarily gruesome. The deaths are just for shock. They're just cheap deaths to shock you. But Ned's death wasn't a cheap death. Ned's death was proving the overarching theme, the point of the story, which is that this is a world where goodness does not win. Being smart wins, right? Winning wins, right? That's what this world is. And so, kind of, if we're looking at what the story is, we're kind of looking at it like, well, we have these characters that we like, that they're not, overall, I guess they'd say they're good, right? But they're not perfect. They're not paragons. We're kind of looking at it like, well, how can these people win? Like, can they stay pretty good and still win? But then going back to what I was saying earlier about kind of why I thought this was important, and ultimately why I'm worried about the 8th season, is that I think it wouldn't be too controversial to say that the show has fallen off from what got it started. And the reason I wanted you to think back about how you started, whether you were in the books or the show, how you got introduced to the series and what you were thinking when you got into it. Because I'm guessing a lot of you were thinking the same thing, like, oh, this is different, and this kind of has a point. This has something to say. And the twist, they were surprising but fair. And I think kind of going really when they left the books, I think that kind of changed. I think it started turning into more of a kind of typical, there's twists and turns. They're not usually earned, I don't think. I think a lot of the times it's just like something happens, even though it doesn't make sense for it to happen. The plot is definitely not as tight there's definitely a lot less tension. And then when there are kind of big deaths, it's just, it just happens. If this channel's name Large Finger, um, and I was just watching Littlefinger get killed like that was just disappointing. You know what I mean? And so I'm just thinking, like, what's the difference between Ned dying and Littlefinger dying this way? With Littlefinger, I feel like they got to a point where they're like, okay, we can't do anything with him anymore, so he's just dead, right? And it didn't have anything to say. It didn't have anything to say about the world or the story. I mean, I guess it did a little bit about Arya and Sansa kind of teaming up or recognizing his evil or recognizing his scheming or what have you, but I don't think it did it very well. Or, maybe you thought it was fine, but it definitely wasn't as good as it used to be. And so the reason I'm worried for season 8 is I feel like the show has been decreasing in meaning, in value, and just kind of cultural significance, or I should say, what impact it could have. Because it could have a lot to say. Like, it still could make a point about, good and evil and what it takes to overcome evil. And, the effects of greed and the hunger for power can have on the world. The effects that our infighting can have on the world. But I'm worried that, it's the last kind of 2 seasons, it's just been on this very paint by numbers path of, the good guys are kind of banding up together, the bad guys are kind of banding up together, and, there's going to be this big fight. That's really what it seems like. And I feel like right now, we can talk about some theories and stuff later, but I feel like right now, whatever you're thinking, if you make 3 theories for what you think is going to happen for the end of the show, one of them's going to be right. One of them's going to be right. And I feel, definitely earlier in the story, you could not really guess. That's what made it great. Was you couldn't guess, but when it happens, it was fair. And so I'm worried that they have this great opportunity, because I feel like right now you have the most people on board, right? You have the people that have been watching for 7 seasons. They're on board. You can do whatever you want. You can be creative. You can have a point. You can do something that is, bittersweet and can be something that's not normal. And, I feel like there's gonna do the easy thing. So, I don't know. I kind of want to be excited. Watching the trailer definitely got me a little bit excited. It feels like they're gonna have a large budget for the dragons and stuff. But I can't help but feel like I'm gonna be disappointed. Sorry for the sound there. Just kind of wallowing a little bit. But yeah, I can't help but feel I'm gonna be disappointed. I don't want to be. I want them to kind of pull the rabbit out of the hat and do something cool with the large audience they have. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have for now. I've just been a little bit annoyed about the stuff I was seeing. Wanted to get some of it off my chest. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the sound and all that. I'm definitely still working on it. Thanks, whoever is back after all that time. Thanks, and everyone else. Whether you're a show watcher or a book reader, let me know what you think. What do you think they can do to pull that rabbit out of the hat? Like I said, what do you think they can do to elevate the show in an artistic sense? And I mean, are you worried about it? Do you think they'll be able to? Do you think they care to? Do you think people are right to be kind of annoyed about the show and all that. I don't know. These are just my thoughts. Thinking, depending on how the show and stuff goes, I might do some more of these. And so make sure you like and subscribe to hear those, and comment, and talk to you guys next time, right?